Hello and welcome to The Last Word. As another week in Indian politics draws to a close, we focus on a lady who is perhaps the most important player in Parliament, but also for many a most intriguing and fascinating enigma, Sonia Gandhi. How should we understand her power and her personality? That's with the editorial chairman of the Outlook Group, Vinod Mehta, the well-known Tehelka and Hindustan Times columnist Ashok Malik, and the author Tavleen Singh, who knew Sonia Gandhi in the 80s and has written about her in her new book, Durbar. Vinod Mehta, let's start with Sonia Gandhi's position in Indian politics. Would you accept that today she is the single most important politician in the country, which is one reason why she fascinates the press and a large section of the public as well?
Well, that's probably true, but I think she's without doubt the single most important person in Congress politics. I think that is self-evident. But here again, I would say that she has, you see, we all talk of dynasty. Of course there's a dynasty. But dynasties have to deliver in the democratic politics. So if in 2014 the Congress suffers a humiliating defeat, then, or even a defeat, then her power will be in the Congress party itself will be greatly weakened. And there's even a possibility that there could be some sort of Sharad Pawar kind of revolt in the Congress party.
Okay.
So I think she's very important in Congress politics, but to say that she's the most important politician in Indian politics, I think you will find two views on that.
Tavleen Singh, you knew her in the 80s before Rajiv Gandhi joined politics, and then again during that period when he was Prime Minister of the country. At the time, she hated politics and politicians. So are you surprised by the fluency as well as the success with which she's translated into a front-rank politician in just 15 odd years?
Well, it's very impressive, Karan. This is somebody who at that point not only loathed politics and politicians, etc., but swore that she would rather her children begged in the streets than went into politics. So she's obviously changed completely. But to me, really, what is most interesting about her is I don't agree with Vinod that she's only important to the Congress party. She is the most important leader in India, and just her being that is a reflection on the other political leaders in India. I think that, they should be quite embarrassed that somebody who came to politics so late should have been overtaking them so certainly.
In other words, she stamped herself and her image of the country very successfully.
Yes, I think so. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Ashok Malik, analysts say that one of her great skills is her capacity to manage a difficult coalition, and she's done it successfully for almost 2 governments. But the weakness is the diarchy whereby power and responsibility split between her and the Prime Minister. Is that diarchy something she imposed, or would you say in the circumstances that prevailed it was inevitable and unavoidable?
Well, I think Mrs. Gandhi recognized very early that her foreign origins, it may be impolite to discuss it in the drawing rooms of Delhi that Tavleen talks about, but the fact is in real politics it would have been a problem if she'd taken public office. It would have been raised by her rivals. We have to accept that. She realized she couldn't get public office, so she wanted somebody else to become Prime Minister, but she wanted to leave her stamp on policy. Now, there are times when there seems to be disagreement between her idea of policy and the Prime Minister's, and that does
But given that she was the one who brought the party close to power on her own, and it was under her leadership it happened, therefore was diarchy inevitable?
Well, I think I'm not sure she brought the party to power on her own. She put together a coalition that sort of squeezed ahead in 2004. In 2009, the Prime Minister can also claim responsibility.
Let's for a moment, Vinod Mehta, focus on the fact that she is Italian in origin, but would you accept that today she's no longer really seen as a foreigner?
See, Karan, this foreign origin thing, in 2004, she turned the disadvantage of this foreign origin by publicly refusing to take up the position of Prime Minister. Now all of us in Delhi's drawing rooms may be very cynical about that, but with the country at large and with the general trend of people thirsting for power, she was seen as someone who gave up power. And that stood her in very good stead amongst the Aam Aadmi in this country, that they said that Italian or not, she gave up power when she could have, she was legitimately entitled to power. And that act of 2004, when she gave up power, I don't think is appreciated enough amongst the more sophisticated people in India. But amongst ordinary people, it was seen as something completely out of, it has never been done. The people in India have seen people thirsting, you know, stabbing for power, backstabbing, and she gave it up, and that stood her in very good stead. So she used a disadvantage to her advantage.
Tavleen Singh, in your book Durbar, you write, and I'm quoting, "I personally found Sonia as foreign as any foreigner I ever met." And yet, at that moment when she could have claimed legitimately the prime ministership, she did something that is uniquely and intrinsically Indian. She renounced power. Do you think that act of renunciation showed how well she understood the psyche of the people that she now was a citizen of the country of? In other words, despite the fact we thought she was a foreign, she was uniquely Indian.
Listen, excuse me, I'm astounded that you talk about renunciation so casually. She is the most powerful politician in this government and in India. She didn't renounce power, she renounced accountability. And I'm not sure that that's such a good idea. And if there are now questions being asked by the Aam Aadmi Party about this lack of accountability, it is because somebody who does what she did has to be accountable. So what we've got now is a situation where she is more powerful than the Prime Minister, and he's the only one accountable. That's not at all a good precedent in a democracy.
Ashok Malik, in 2004, the BJP certainly viewed her as a foreigner. If you recall, Sushma Swaraj famously promised that she would shave off her head if Sonia became Prime Minister. Today, 8 years later, how does the BJP view her, and have they accepted that she is now, for all purposes, Indian?
Look, as a citizen, as legally, and as a person who's living in this country and is an Indian, there's no question about her being Indian. She is legally entitled to being Prime Minister, President, anything. In 2004,
I'm talking in perception terms rather than legal terms.
Okay, let me complete that. In 2004, Sushma Swaraj's response was completely overdone and uncalled for. But let me go back to the point which I think Tavleen made. If she had become Prime Minister, if she takes public office, it's unfair to expect that her political rivals, BJP or anybody else, or even columnist or whoever it is, will not bring up her foreign origins at some point or the other.
But would they have done it repeatedly for 8 years? It may have happened for 6 months and it would have disappeared. What she did, by that incredible act of renunciation, is that she found her way into the hearts of Indians by doing something that they perceived as a very Indian gesture.
Well, renunciation is not just an Indian gesture. Renunciation has existed in other traditions as well.
But we like to believe it's Indian.
No, that's besides the point.
That's our perception.
Yes, but I think she was pragmatic and intelligent enough to realize that a person of foreign origin taking public office would not perhaps be as non-controversial as some people make it out to be.
Which of course also suggests that she's extremely astute and clever.
Yes.
Yet, despite that, Vinod Mehta, Sonia Gandhi remains an enigma. We know very little about her. We see even less of her outside politics, and she rarely, if ever, speaks about herself. Do you see this as wise strategy or as a self-denying mistake?
Well, I don't think it's either, Karan. It's what she is, you see. That's the kind of person she is. And by her standards, she has changed a lot. She has become much more public. She talks. She has tried to have a public persona. But she is not a public person. She is very uncomfortable in public situations. And she has moved as far as she could have moved. And therefore, to expect a person to go against the fundamental grains of her personality is very unfair. She has moved as far as she could, And one of the reasons why she gave up the prime ministership is that you couldn't be prime minister and remain behind the scenes. So she realized that, and she has moved as far. Now, whether she's an enigma, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, that's a different matter. But the question is, this is the way she is, and the Congress party seems to be okay with that. So I don't think we can complain too much.
Okay.
But that's the way she is.
Tavleen Singh, of the 80s when you knew her, you wrote, Sonia guarded her privacy fiercely, and this gave her a reserve that was forbidding. But since then, if you accept the point that Vinod Mehta has just made, do you think she's had to actually struggle with her personality and adapt to being a public figure? Or was it something that you think just came naturally?
Look, I don't accept that it's possible for people who enter public life to demand that kind of privacy. It was all right when she was a private citizen to insist on privacy. But when you enter public life, you have an obligation to the people. The American president has, a daily press conference? He has to speak out on every issue. So I think what she's done is, she has a very clever inner voice who told her right at the beginning to, be careful. And so she has the best of both worlds. But, to say, oh, poor Singh, she likes her privacy, that's really not on. You either enter public life in which you accept public responsibility, accountability, and all of it, or you stay as a private citizen. So, all the sympathy that Mr. Mehta has for her is a little bit misplaced, I think.
Critics say, Ashok Malik, that Sonia comes across not just as reserved, but sometimes aloof and distant. Even when she's perfectly correct, she tends to be unemotional. Sometimes people think she's cold. And although she's always superbly dressed, there's something stiff and artificial about her immaculateness. Now, is that a fair comment, or does it slightly smack of prejudice?
Look, I think these are adjectives which we have no way of sort of verifying. None of us, at least I don't know her personally, I have no way of sort of...
But you see her in the pictures, you see her on TV, and you can judge her.
She is reserved, she is a private person, and I think that's the way she's been all her life. She's had a tough life, emotionally sort of wrenching life. She's seen 2 assassinations in her family. So if there is a certain stiffness to her, I can forgive her that. I'd like to add one point to what Tavleen said. Giving interviews, of course, we would like the Congress president to give more interviews to journalists, but we can't force her, just as we can't force the BJP president to give fewer interviews to journalists. But giving interviews to journalists is not the only way of getting your point across as a public person. There are other ways as well, and I wish she would use some of them.
In other words, you're saying more interaction with people in general in the country.
You could write an article in the newspaper if you want.
Find ways of expressing yourself and letting people know what you think and feel.
Yes.
And you think that's an important thing for politicians to do, which she doesn't do.
Yes.
All right, let's take a break at that point. When we come back, we're going to switch and talk about the personality of Sonia Gandhi. We have with us Tavleen Singh, who knew her in the early 80s and can reveal something of what Sonia was like before she became a public figure and before she became someone that we have got used to seeing as one of our leaders. That's in a moment's time. Join us after the break. Welcome back to The Last Word. We're discussing Sonia Gandhi. Tavleen Singh, let's turn to the personality of Sonia Gandhi. You knew her in the 80s when you lived in a Barsati in Delhi's golf links, and she would bring clothes for your young son Atish, who I believe was barely 2 at the time. You say she's fiercely loyal and devoted to her friends and helped interviews with Rajiv for your paper, even when Rajiv's advisors were reluctant that MJ Akbar should interview him. Is she thoughtful and caring?
Well, she's a very good friend, and until she drops you. But she can drop friends very easily. She actually was just a rather sweet person, who had a great quality of friendship. What I always puzzled about, which I think I mentioned in the book, is that she, having lived in India for most of her life, that she never saw any of the larger issues, the bigger picture, the social problems. There were ladies in her set who went to Mother Teresa and did a few things. And, one of the problems that arose when she became the Prime Minister's wife was she would travel with him and not do anything. And that was the only thing that concerned me. But I have to say that she was very good to my son Atish, who had the nicest clothes in Delhi because of her. And, you know, she could be a very good friend.
Ashok Malik, even though she effectively made Dr. Manmohan Singh Prime Minister, and he is, if I can put it so bluntly, her creation, nonetheless, she never in public makes the Prime Minister look small, and she's extremely conscious of deferring to him in protocol terms every time and every time. Is that not a good quality? Because you don't normally see that sort of behavior in India.
Well, it is. So symbolically, she does sort of defer to him. She visits his house rather than has him visiting her house, which is all fine. But in terms of policy, as everyone in journalistic Delhi and policy Delhi knows, in terms of policy, especially economic policy, he hasn't had a free hand. And there have been occasions when letters she's written in protest, as in her capacity as NEC president or as Congress president, to the Prime Minister, have been leaked to the press, which show her opposing policy initiatives the government is considering.
But was that an attempt to undermine and restrict and restrain, or was it simply a reflection of the fact that she has a legitimate say? Because after all, she is the leader of the party, and it's only because of her not wanting the top job that he's got it. He didn't really have an elected claim to it.
Well, neither did, in that sense, her party won 145 seats in 2024.
But she had the support of the majority of parliament behind her for her to be Prime Minister, not Manmohan Singh.
The fact is, if you've said Manmohan Singh is a capable Prime Minister, I'm giving him the job, then let him run it his way.
Let me take up another point of her personality with you, Vinod Mehta. She only very rarely gives interviews, and I don't think she's done one for the last 5 years as far as I can recall. Is that just shyness or a general aversion to the press? Or do you accept Tavleen's point that there is here a certain reluctance to be accountable, and a reluctance that stems perhaps from the nature of her personality?
Well, Karan, I don't think it's a question. That's the way she is. She's a very introverted person. But I think I want to make a comment on what Tavleen said, that she doesn't understand what politics in India is like. She has no understanding of poverty. She lives in this gilded world of spaghetti and lasagna, etc., etc.
I never said that.
But what please let me finish. What I'm saying is that this is the same person who in 2009 started the National Advisory Council, and this is the same person who has insisted that the Congress remain its Aam Aadmi personality and remain centre-left. So she is the one, while Mr. Chidambaram and the Prime Minister and others are pushing the Congress to the right, she has stayed with the Aam Aadmi, and she won the 2009 election because she was sensitive to poverty. Now, whether that's a put-on thing or not, I don't know, but
that's completely wrong. The Congress won urban seats.
She understands poverty, and she understands the electoral mileage in politics.
Let me give you the last word in a sense, Tavleen Singh. What would be your judgment of Sonia Gandhi in the last 8 years?
Not a very good one. I think that she has undermined the institution of the Prime Ministership. And this business of her allowing, you know, she certainly didn't give Narasimha Rao a free hand either. So I think what she likes very much is power without accountability. And I didn't say that she lived in a gilded cage or anything that Vinod is saying, but certainly when she chooses to be on the left, for a start she didn't win because of her concern for the poor. They won in urban seats in 2009 mostly. I think they won more than 75 urban seats. But you know, all I'm trying to say is that when you're in that position, you should have some kind of vision for India, some kind of place we're going to, and I don't see that.
Very quickly, you wanted to intervene.
One thing, when the UPA came to power, India was growing at 8%. Today it's growing at 5%. The UPA leader can't escape responsibility.
Well, you're blaming that particularly on Sonia Gandhi?
No, I'm blaming them on a whole host of people, including Sonia Gandhi.
All right, at that point, we're going to have to end this particular show. There's a lot more that you could have said about Sonia Gandhi. There's a lot more that people will be saying about Sonia Gandhi, but we've run out of time. But undoubtedly, it's a subject, a personality, and a politician that we will keep returning to from time after time. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Have a great weekend and see you on Monday.